This is a video review of the HTC Arrive, which is the CDMA version of the HTC 7 Pro and is available on Sprint. The HTC Arrive can be purchased at the usual price of $200 with a 2-year contract. The phone will require one of Sprint's data plans, but their data plan includes free Telenav GPS navigation, which works quite well and is an incredible offer compared to paying a ridiculous monthly fee to use it on T-Mobile. The phone's hardware is pretty appealing, but the phone is quite thick compared to modern smartphones. It's even thicker than an original Motorola Droid. However, it is a little thinner than the older HTC Touch Pro 2, which is nice. The phone's height is basically the same as the HT7, but its width is a little smaller, which kind of makes the screen look odd with all that extra space at the bottom for those capacitive buttons. However, when you're just looking at the HTC Arrive alone, it looks perfectly normal. The back design of the phone doesn't exactly fit with the front design, since the back has a more rugged brushed metal look, while the front aims for that glossy black finish, but nevertheless, the phone feels solid and well built. The buttons are actually easy to press. I'm talking about the camera buttons and the volume buttons. And there's no wiggle space on the buttons, unlike on the HT7 where the volume rocker was actually loose. So the phone is well constructed. And when you slide out the keyboard, the screen automatically pops up at an angle. This may feel strange at first, but you'll get used to typing at this angle. It would be nice if the screen pop-up was optional, since some may like typing with a flat screen, but it isn't too big of a deal. The sliding mechanism feels quite solid actually, and that's after a couple weeks of use. You'll get used to sliding the keyboard out, and it does have kind of a spring-loaded feel to it once you get it halfway out, and it doesn't really take much effort to slide it out. And sliding it back in is pretty easy once you know how it closes. At first it might feel a little weird, but it's pretty easy to close. The keyboard is actually pretty nice and works well in Windows Phone 7, but there are some instances where it becomes a nuisance, like when you are browsing the web and want to switch tabs. To switch tabs, you have to close the keyboard, tilt the phone upright, then click the Switch Tabs button, and then slide the keyboard back out, since Windows Phone 7 hides all those extra buttons while in landscape mode on the browser. Typing on the keyboard itself is quite solid and feels really good. It'll take some time before you are fast at typing on the keyboard, but once you use it for a few days, you will most likely love it. However, the on-screen keyboard is actually just as fast to use, in my opinion, and that on-screen keyboard works well in both portrait and landscape. When I compared the typing speeds, I actually typed faster with the on-screen keyboard than I did with the slide-out keyboard, but they are both very close. For longer sessions of writing, I found myself using the slide-out keyboard since it simply has more precision. The screen definitely looks crisp and clear. Text is really sharp since the screen has the same resolution as the HT7, but is only 3.6 inches diagonally, which means it has more pixel density. However, there are a few negatives about the screen. One problem is that you can barely see the screen in daylight. The sunlight lowers your visibility of the screen just like it does on the HT7, and that can be a big issue. Another problem is that gradients on the screen don't show up correctly. The phone software must be set to 16-bit instead of 32-bit, since gradients are showing up choppy instead of smooth. Now, this issue has been appearing on HT7s, and it seems like it was a software update that actually caused the gradient issue, so it could be fixed again by another software update from HTC, but it's a bit disappointing to see these choppy gradients when you just bought a new phone. Otherwise, the display is vibrant and sharp. The HTC Arrive comes preloaded with Nodu, so your games load fast and the marketplace doesn't crash. This also means that you have copy-paste out of the gate. Copy-paste works extremely well, and actually made my Android using friend jealous, since it's so fast and simple to use. The slide-out keyboard also includes arrow keys that let you navigate the cursor, which is a great touch since placing the cursor right where you want it can sometimes be a challenge in Windows Phone 7. The camera on the HTC Arrive is only a 5 megapixel camera, and it only takes decent pictures. It definitely won't replace an actual camera, but it does the job when you just need to take a quick picture, and it looks good for uploading some pictures to Facebook or simple things like that. It still, however, suffers from the usual HTC camera problems, which is that it can't record a video at a decent frame rate when you're in an area with lower lighting than usual. So unless you're outside or in a daylight lit room, the frame rate will be ridiculously reduced. So if you're filming something inside at nighttime, even with lights on, it usually has a big impact on that frame rate. Also, you have to hold the phone perfectly steady when taking a picture, or else it'll come out severely motion blurred. It's a lot easier to hold it steady when taking a picture because the button's a lot easier to press than the HD7 is, but it's still pretty annoying that it doesn't have any image stabilization help. The flash on the phone is pretty bright, but not as bright as the HD7's dual LED flash. However, it gets the job done and does act as a decent flashlight. The internet speeds on the phone felt pretty fast and were extremely reliable. Unlike T-Mobile, where the data seems to randomly stop working for me, Sprint's data constantly worked every time I took the phone out. I won't go into any speed comparisons because it's a known fact that data speeds will vary depending on which city you live in, but I can say that I never felt a need to turn on Wi-Fi since the data was plenty fast and always reliable. Calls sound pretty good on the HTC Arrive, and the earpiece is set at a higher volume than the HD7, which is excellent since the HD7 was pretty quiet to hear. The speakerphone also works really well on the HTC Arrive.
Press 2. To change your personal options, press 3.
When we tested the call quality, both the HD7 and Arrive sounded basically identical, and they both sounded like pretty good cell phones. There's no distortion in the sound or nothing noticeably bad, but when we turned on the speakerphones, the HTC Arrive actually sounded better, and it was less obvious. Our callers didn't notice that we were really talking on a speakerphone. So the speakerphone is pretty good, and we could hear them perfectly from our end on the HTC Arrive. The phone also doesn't have any major signal degradation, so you can hold it just about any way and usually pick up a signal just fine. The speakers for the music are also a lot louder compared to the HD7. They actually play at a reasonable volume like any smartphone should. Music also sounded a lot better quality-wise through the HTC Arrive than it did with the HD7, and it sounded better through the speakers itself and also through plugging it into some wired speakers. So the sound quality was noticeably better on the HTC Arrive. Battery life was also better on the Arrive compared to the HD7, and you should be able to last the whole day without charging it until the next night, and that's with moderate to heavy use. You can find the HTC Arrive from Sprint for $200 with a 2-year contract, or if you live outside of the United States, it's called the HTC 7 Pro and is basically the same phone, except it's a GSM version instead of CDMA. Overall, the HTC Arrive did impress me, but it still feels way too thick for a smartphone, and I was really disappointed when my friend's Motorola Droid, the original one, was actually thinner. So that was probably the main disappointment. Also, the screen is a bit disappointing because when you're outside you can't really see it that well. But otherwise, the high points are the keyboard's really good, the speaker and sound quality is really great, and the phone call quality is pretty good, and you do get free GPS navigation, which is important because Microsoft never put Bing navigation on Windows Phone 7 yet. And overall, it's a really snappy operating system, and you probably already know a lot about Windows Phone 7, but it has a great app store, really fluid interface, and it all works really well, especially after the No-Do update. There's also plenty of space for your music since the phone comes with a 16 gigabyte storage card from Sprint. Once again, the phone is called the HTC Arrive, and you can find it exclusively on Sprint.